What's going on, everybody? It's your boy C-Zar with C-Zar Gets Crypto, and we are talking about Bitcoin today. Talking about Bitcoin. Looking on the 4-hour here, there's some things going on. If we're looking at the RSI, let's start at the RSI actually. RSI kind of looks bullish, I have to say. We got these higher lows. I guess this was kind of a lower low than this one here, but it's an ascending kind of structure. What's not bullish, in my opinion, is we get into these areas of strength finally, and we just reject it down. That's not, you want to, whenever you get in these areas of strength, you want to hold it. If you come down, you want to reject the downside like you did over here. Where at the moment, we rejected the upside, and now we're hanging out down here. It's a little different, right? It's a little different. But to be fair, we're in a more neutral posture at the moment. We are above the 50, which is good if you're bullish. And the one thing I'd say to watch out for is this potential rejection on the 4-hour off the 60 area. That is also known anywhere from like the 60 to the 70. That is the bullish control. I mean, technically above the 60 is the bullish control zone. 60 to 100 is the bullish control zone. But you go from 60 to 70, it's bullish control. Above 70, you're in the overbought zone. I think it's important to kind of differentiate the two. But the overbought zone is also the bullish control zone. And I say that because, I mean, I'm pretty sure that's what it's technically called, but also because, you know, you get the most bullish moves whenever you're in the overbought zone. You get the most bearish moves when you're in the oversold zone. And long story short, again, you know, whenever we did something like this before, we got up in these areas, we held it. When we came down, we rejected it, and then it was a strong move up. This time, however, just like this last time, we rejected it, and we went lower. We rejected it, and we're actually hanging out down here. I would say, if anything, that's a sign of not strength. I wouldn't say it's quite so weak yet, but it's not strength. Looking at the purple line here, the way that the purple line is interacting with price, or price is interacting with it, this is the 123 moving average on the 4-hour. That means it takes 123 bars closing for this purple line to form one iteration, right? So this is the average of the last 123 closes. We are hugging it. We're hugging it. Generally, if it's to hold as support, you want to come down and bounce right off it. You want to bounce right off it. You don't want to bounce and come back and meander around here. You don't want to see this kind of, man, I'm just drawing all kinds of shapes here. This generally means that you're going to break, and I'll show you what I mean by that. We'll go back and see some other kind of iterations. Here, you're coming up. It should be resistance, but it wasn't, because you held it, you meandered around. So then what'd you do? You broke it. This time it was a bullish break. Whereas now, right, we're meandering. It could be a bearish break. And that is my expectation. I do expect that it's going to be a bearish break. Here, we came up to it and we resisted it, right? We did not meander. For 2 candles, 3 candles, whatever. And then we got below it, tested it as resistance, had a big candle down, and what did we do? We moved down. We moved lower, ultimately. Here, we were above it, coming down into it, trying to find support. We didn't. We meandered, broke down. Here, resistance, down. Here, resistance, down. Meandering, down. Kind of weird. You know, it's not always going to be 100%, but more or less. And again, it's not going to be 100%, meaning that this could meander and it could go up. That's totally possible. But my bias is still to the downside. I would definitely say it's to the downside. And especially just because generally, again, when you hug this line, it's not a good thing if you're hugging it from the top. It's a good thing if you're hugging it from the bottom coming up. But at the moment, we were above it, we're coming down, and that to me shows that this line is going to be ultimately disrespected. We're going to go down. And if we're looking at the daily, I mean, this purple line here is pretty far away. We could come down, and I do expect actually that we are going to come down to this purple line. Right now it's at about 28k, a little bit over 28k, but right around 28k. It's possible that we could come down there, see a nice bounce. Maybe we go slightly below it, and then bounce from there. Again, breaking it is not a bad thing. It can break it a little bit, but you want to see that rejection pretty immediately. You don't want to break it and then hang out down here. That's not what. Again, that's not condemning, but that's not what I would want to see. Because again, I am expecting that we go down, but ultimately afterwards, I'm expecting that we go up. And if we look, let's just see if we see any fib levels kind of around that area. I've drawn this fib like every day for the last, I don't know, 3 weeks now. This purple line around here is the 0.5. You don't generally see significance on the 0.5. It's actually not a fib level, but when you do see significance on it, you see significant moves. You get significant moves. And something else to kind of put, this high point, this high close here, even this high tip right here, they're both below the 382. Maybe we don't find support on the 0.5. Maybe we find, I deleted everything, I didn't mean to. Maybe we find support on the 382. But if we find support on the 382, that doesn't mean that we can't wick below it. And we could come down, wick below it. We could even close below it and then immediately the next day come back above it. But more likely, in my opinion, what we would do is we would wick below it, come back up and close above it, and then it would be off to the races from there. That's kind of my expectation at the moment. And if we were to do that, you know, in the coming days, if this was to move, if this took place in like the next week, if it took 7 days to do, this is just going to move up, right, over the next 7 days. Or maybe not that dramatically. I'm sorry, let's see. It'd probably move up. I keep messing it up. Something like this, right? And that's July 16th. That's what the date says right there. It's July 11th right now, so 5 days. If it took 5 days to move down to about that right there, that's 28.55k, 28,550k, $28,550, right? If it was to move that low, we could go below the purple line, still close above the 382. We don't even have to interact with the 0.5. And again, the reason I'm saying this is because it's not impossible to bounce off the 0.5. It happens. It's actually, you know, it's not completely uncommon. It's just not the expectation. The more common thing would be to hold the 382. Generally, you don't even look at the point. It's there just in case, but that's not an area that I'm expecting we find significance on. And to be completely fair as well, we could go lower than that. We could go to the 618, the golden ratio itself. We could bounce right off of that. And again, with that, we could go slightly below it, come back up and close above it, and then it's on to the races. But who knows? You know, it's just speculation at the moment. Right now, we are experiencing very neutral price action. We've been in this range for about 3 weeks now, to the day. 21 bars, 3 weeks to the day. So it is getting to that point where I think we're going to see resolution one way or another. And I've kind of illustrated this in my previous videos. You know, comparing this price range to this over here, from when we got into it to where we broke out of it, which was this day, that took 24 days, a little bit over 3 weeks, and we're at 21 days right now, right? Whenever we had this kind of price range, similar, I would say it's very similar to this one too, very similar to this. This one broke upwards, this one broke downwards, ultimately went higher. I kind of would more expect something like this to happen. But when we got in this price range to where we broke out of it, that took 20 days, 24. And again, I know I've done this, guys. I know it seems repetitive, but I think it's important to note, you know, we broke out of this range here on the 21st day. Could we be doing something similar to that right now, being that we are, again, 21 days deep in this range? I think we could. I really do think we could. And this RSI, again, on the daily, it looks somewhat bullish. It looks somewhat bullish, bouncing off this 50 area, which is also a previous area. Like if I put a line right there at the bottom, we had resistance, support, resistance. And you go back, I don't know, a little meandering, whatever, but like in relative time frames, it's been a little bit more significant. I would say it's semi-significant. It's not super significant, and ultimately what we really have is we have lower highs and lower lows in the RSI. I think we're in a downward trend. And until we break that trend, until we break this kind of this descending structure, my bias for the short term is to the downside. It's definitely to the downside. And I think looking at these candles, man, if you look at it ever since, I guess, this candle here, since the top, this was the top, but this was like the real top in my opinion. If I was to measure a fib, I'm not going to include this top. I would measure it from this top. And since this top, the bigger candles have been to the downside. They've been to the downside. If we're looking at the 4 hour again, the bigger candles are to the downside. The bigger volume is to the downside. I think people are selling up here, and I think once we get to this breaking point, wherever it is, you know, whenever it is, I think we will see the resolution. Again, I don't expect it to be dramatic. I would expect it to be something kind of like this. Maybe it's something like this. That's totally possible, but we were way further away from the purple line on this one. Like from top to bottom, that was a 22% move, where here, I guess from this top to bottom. That's an 11% move. It's not going to be as dramatic as this. I would in fact expect it to be more something like this, where again down here in the RSI we do go lower, and actually if you kind of look at the RSI, it is different. We went a lot higher up here, but as of right now it's kind of acting similar, right? You've got lower highs here, lower lows. You bounced even right here off of a similar range, and if you form this lower high like we did here, we are very likely going to break below the 50. And generally when you break below the 50 on the daily RSI, that's not a good thing. You do see some kind of a semi-significant or a very significant move, and I think it'll be more of the semi-significant kind. What is significant about this low, it might look like it bounced in the middle of nowhere, but really you bounced off of this 40 area. The 40 area is known as the bearish control zone whenever you're below it. So when you're rejecting bearish control, you are showing a sign of strength. And whenever you show signs of strength, you get a higher high, which is exactly what we got. I don't expect that when we get our higher high, we're going to form a lower low. I don't expect that. It could happen, but ultimately, I think once we get this low somewhere around this purple line, probably a little bit below it actually, we will make strides higher, above, very likely above 34K, and potentially even onwards to 37K or 40K or beyond that even. But I do think in the short term we're going to move down, but ultimately this whole move is going to be a move upwards. I'm drawing very ugly shapes here, but you can see it on the weekly, right? We can see it on the weekly. Dun, 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 dun. All right, so if we're looking at the weekly, we've kind of got this ascending formation. Okay, I keep thinking back to my video I made the other day where I'm like, I don't like diagonal lines, and I keep using diagonal lines, but it is relative. It is relative. We are forming higher lows, and if anything, we're in this kind of channel, I would say. Let's see. I guess something like, it's not symmetrical. Maybe if we move it up a little bit more, I don't know, something like that. Yeah, something like that. We could be in a channel, something like this, and maybe all we do is we come down and we find a little bit of support at the bottom of this channel. This is on a weekly time frame, so that would actually be weeks away. What I did, if we did it this week, the low would be right around 27K, 27.2K, which again is where the 618 is. If we go to the daily and I draw this back on the fib scale, that's below the purple line there, right? And if we go from bottom to top here, the 618 is kind of right around there. And on the daily here, looking at it, on the weekly it looks like we have like a nice kind of bounce off this area, but on the daily you can see we went slightly below this line. We could do that, and maybe this line isn't drawn perfectly. I don't know. Maybe we're not in a channel. But something else I actually just noticed on the weekly, I want to point it out, is we have some kind of, and I'm sure there's plenty of people who've talked about it, but we have some kind of like shoulder here, a head here, and a shoulder here. And I know what that looks like. I'm not going there, guys, but it's a smiley face with eyes, clearly. But what you would do with something like that is you would measure, let's see, measure here. I would consider this, I don't know, man, that could be the top. You'd measure this, and then whenever you break the neckline, which technically would be here, this would be your measurement. This is good for a move all the way up to 40K. And this was kind of a rough, it kind of looks like a head and shoulders or an inverse head and shoulders, a slanted inverse head and shoulders. The right shoulder is weird to me. The volume is wrong. The left shoulder is just, if this is a inverse head and shoulders, this guy has elephantitis, man. This is a very big left shoulder and a very small right shoulder. But the head itself looks proper, and the levels themselves look decent enough. The volume's wrong, but volume again, it doesn't have to match. It doesn't have to. I would want it to. It'd make it look nicer, but it doesn't have to. And ultimately, if this was an inverse head and shoulders, again, that would point us up to about 40K. And that's not a straight shot, right? We've been in this. The bottom was back here in November 2022. We've been in this for a while. So could we move down and ultimately still maintain this like higher high structure? Yeah, definitely. And I feel like I'm on a tangent, guys. I feel like I might have lost some people. I don't know, maybe. But let's see. Let's see here. Looking at the daily RSI at the moment, looks like we could be rejecting the 60. Not good. Looking at the 4-hour RSI, looks like we could be rejecting the 60 at the moment. Again, not good. Hugging this purple line, the 123, that would tell me, not always, but generally, that tells me that we are going to see it break. And if we break this purple line, it's not going to be a break like this. It's not going to be like whoop and then up. That's not a break. Like this was not a break. That's not a break. A break is going to be something more like, let me see here, is going to be something like that. You know, that's a break, and potentially lower. And then if we break this purple line, we get that. What we're setting up for really ultimately is breaking this overall range. And if we break this overall range, we will very likely see, again, if we break it to the downside, not the upside. If we break it to the downside, we'll likely see one of these major fib extensions here at the well, I guess we've already seen the 236, but at anywhere between the 382 or the 618, somewhere in this range, which it's the same stuff I've been saying for about, I don't know, 3 weeks now, around 28.7k to 27.1k, somewhere in that area. And ultimately, fibs or not, I really like the idea of buying below this purple line. That's kind of what I'm gauging off of at the moment. I really like the idea of buying when the RSI is below the 50. And I'm waiting for that. We haven't gotten that yet. We could be rejecting off of this area, which we've rejected off before, just forming lower highs, lower lows, you know, and then we could do something exactly like what we saw back here, which is we don't have to get into the oversold zone. We can reject the 40 area, bounce off from there, and continue to go higher. And I do think ultimately that's what we're going to get. But I feel like I'm just rambling. I feel like I jumped around, I bounced around. I'm a bit random tonight. So with that, I'm gonna end the video. If you like the video, leave a thumbs up, subscribe, see more, and I will catch you guys on the next one. Take care. Have a good night. Bye bye.